Part 3 1. The train once more carried us toward the south as far as that small, deserted station where Uncle Manuel's coupe, driven by little Andres, took us back to the hacienda. And the mist once more came out to meet us as it had on the night of our wedding, and we again entered into the mist, and the mist once more closed in upon us. And when we reached the lagoon, the horses were neighing and rearing so that Daniel was again compelled to take hold of the reins. And little Andres related to me how, the previous night, 2 boys from the village who had come to fish by moonlight had seen a lady dressed all in white, sitting under the willow trees, sobbing. It seems, however, that it was only when they noticed that her hair was floating over her shoulders, and that the train of her dress went so far as to disappear under the surface of the waters, that they realized she must have been a ghost, and, uttering great cries, had run away to the Santa Ana mill, where brandy had been given to them. However, greatly to my surprise, I noticed that it was entirely without apprehension that I heard of Teresa's ghost, and without any feeling of despair that I found myself back again in the dull, dreary existence which was to be mine from now on. And it was, in fact, with a feeling of great calm, all very astonishing to me, that I went back to my old dresses, to my customary ways, and that I once more found myself face to face with the mist and its eternal silence. A soft, penetrating inner voice seemed to be speaking to me at all times. "The years can go by now," the voice would say, "and lines can spread out over your face, and gray hair intermingle with your dark hair, your flesh become dry, and your body emaciated by old age. What does it all matter to you now? What does it matter to you if your body withers away, since it has known love? With this wonderful memory in your heart, you will be able to bear cheerfully a long, dreary existence, and even repeat day after day, without weariness, all the small gestures that make up your daily life." And in vain I found myself replying to that voice, "No, no, that night of love you call a wonderful memory was in fact only madness, a madness that leaves me amazed and stunned, a madness for which I want to pay with an entire life of devotion to Daniel." For the voice, skeptically and smilingly, kept answering me, "What's the use of imagining a remorse you never felt? Go on, Helga. Enjoy the only moment in your life when you have felt yourself loved. Enjoy it in your memory and in your dreams, and in that way you will find happiness." "Happiness! Happiness! In madness and in sin? Never, never!" I protested. But while I was getting dressed, walking, eating, talking to Daniel, and quietly carrying on a peaceful, empty existence, my imagination, all the time, in spite of myself, was every moment reenacting over and over again all the details of my night of love. And as it happened, what the voice had said to me was actually becoming true. The memory of that unforgettable night was filling me with a mysterious sense of well-being, greatly resembling happiness. In the evening after dinner, the luminous gray eyes of Landa would never fail to appear like 2 stars in the midst of the burning coals my hand was stirring in the fireplace, and I could not make up my mind to rise and thus break the silent ecstasy into which I was thrown by the sight of those eyes shining for me in the depths of the flame, and lasting all night as the flame itself. "What are you staring at in the fireplace all the time?" Daniel asked me one evening. "Why, at nothing at all." "Then is it to the logs that you're sending all those tender smiles?" I gave no answer, but I could feel my heart throbbing. "Be careful, Elga. If you keep on living like this in your dreams, next thing you know, you'll be talking to yourself." And as I did not answer, he put on his spurs and his poncho, and went out into the night, looking very angry. 2. Certain mornings, without any apparent reason, I would awaken with the feeling that in the course of the next 24 hours some unexpected joy was about to enter my life. This made it possible for me to go through the day in a hopeful mood, and almost with a sense of exaltation. All afternoon, while Serena was playing on her guitar one romance after another, while Clara was busy threading my needles, and Amanda was relating over again her impressions of the ball, I could not help expecting every moment that unaccountable event which was to change the course of my destiny. And in spite of the sullen and persistent blame my conscience all afternoon was forcing upon me, I still could not help waiting for that miracle which never would seem to happen. Until one day, however, right in the middle of a romance, Daniel suddenly burst into the big hall, looking very aggressive. "I would certainly like to know when this much-talked-about trousseau can be expected to be finished," he said. Serena stopped playing, and Clara and Amanda looked at each other in surprise, for it was indeed quite unusual for Daniel to come back as early as this from the mills. "The trousseau is practically finished now, Daniel, but I don't see any reason why our sewing should upset you so," I heard myself answering calmly. "Upset me? You're the one who's upset. Upset in the head. You spend your days dreaming and chatting over your embroidery and listening to those silly, stupid songs." "They're not stupid, and Serena has a lot of talent," I answered stiffly, in fear he might have offended the young girl. "As far as I'm concerned, I don't think she has any at all, and that is why I want her to leave immediately with her guitar. And as for you, Amanda, be good enough to light a fire. It's freezing in here. You, Clara, clean the tables and chairs of all that linen and thread and everything else." "And what about me? What do you want me to do?" I asked Daniel, while the three young girls followed his instructions, trying to conceal their laughter. He looked at me very coldly. You will take off my spurs," he said at last, intending clearly to humiliate me for my innocent mockery. "With pleasure!" I exclaimed, and kneeling down swiftly on the stone floor, I began to undo the straps of those beautiful spurs with silver buckles that tinkled so prettily as he walked. "Listen, Elga, you seem to be rather gay since that famous ball. Did you really enjoy it as much as all that?" "Oh, yes," I sighed, thankful for the task that prevented me from lifting up to him my blushing face. "So then it is about the ball that you were chatting all the time with these three young fools?" "No, certainly not all the time." "And presumably it is about the ball that you keep on dreaming day and night with your mouth wide open?" "Oh, but Daniel, never with my mouth open." "Why, yes. Ever since we came back, you never listen to me any more when I talk, and you don't even see me when I'm here. By the way, have you finished putting away those spurs? Now stand up and look at me. There is something I would like to tell you." "All right, I'm getting up. Here I am, looking at you," I said, able at last to control my emotion. "What is it that you want to tell me?" "Nothing," he snapped back, after he had stared at me silently for a while. "Nothing except to remind you that I married you for the privilege of not seeing you do any more sewing." "That's right," I cried, as the words he had spoken to Aunt Mercedes when he proposed to me came back to my mind. "I do not love Elga, but I will give her a home where she won't have to sew, and I won't be alone any more there at the hacienda in all that mist. I won't be alone any more in all that mist." "Daniel!" I cried, suddenly realizing the meaning of his unexpected return, and of his complaints. But he was already gone, slamming the door behind him. 3. It was in the course of my long wanderings through the woods that the voice of temptation would speak to me with the greatest persuasiveness, and I could not help listening to it and following it with its crazy elaborations as I went walking enfolded, isolated, and protected by the mist, now no longer my enemy, but my silent accomplice. "You were right to come as far as this," the voice said to me. "Do you remember this tree trunk? This is the spot where you fell down while you were running away, pursued by the greyhounds. Do you remember? It is here he took you in his arms and brought you back seated in front of him on his horse. The traces of this never-to-be-forgotten return journey should still be on the damp earth, there under the fallen leaves. Look for them. Walk, walk still further. Go over every inch of that road he followed, pressing you close to his heart. He fell in love with you then. Yes, he fell in love with you madly. That is what he told you once and 1,000 times, all through that marvelous night. Do you remember? I am in love with you, madly. But you, Elga, do you love me a little? I, oh yes, of course I love you. I love you. I love you. Elga, didn't I tell you that some day you would be talking to yourself? Oh my God! I had spoken aloud, and there was Daniel standing in front of me, as if sprung up by magic from behind the high ferns. What was this obsession that was making him follow me around? "Is it me you love that much?" he inquired. "No, of course not," I retorted angrily, the shame of having been thus trapped by him making me answer him in anger for the first time in my life. And for the first time in his life, an answer of mine having probably wounded him in his pride, I heard him asking me in a voice which pretended to be calm, "If not me, then it must have been some imaginary being, a prince perhaps, from one of your stories, maybe?" "That's it," I answered, accepting with much relief the suggestion he offered, for the fear of having betrayed my secret already had taken the place of my anger. "Well, so much the better for you," he said again after a pause. "So much the better for you, for only an imaginary being could respond to the love of a girl as skinny and as silly as you." And thereupon, insolently turning his back from me, he disappeared through the high ferns. That same evening, little Andres delivered to me a message from him. He would sleep at the mills from now on. That was the message he sent. "At the mills? But where? On sawdust?" I commented laughingly, ready to face what appeared to be a definite though unjust punishment for my behavior of the morning. "There are beds there for the use of the night watchman," Andres was explaining, when Amanda interrupted him. "Let him sleep where he wants. That's his business after all. But I shall not let you spend one night all alone in this big house. I will sleep here tonight," she concluded heroically. "Why, of course not. Thank you, Amanda. I assure you, you don't have to. I'm not afraid of ghosts, you know." 4. It was true I was not afraid of ghosts, yet that night I happened to be very much afraid by the terrific storm which woke me up suddenly in the middle of the night. "Oh, my God, my God!" I implored, trembling at each roll of the thunder and hiding my head childishly under the covers. Don't be afraid, Elga," the evil voice was beginning again to whisper in my ear. "Think of Landa. Think of him, and you will no longer be afraid of the storm. Think of him. Perhaps the same thunderstorm that awakened you here awakened him too, out there in that lovely room with the faded chintz, so well known to you. Look, now he is getting up, getting dressed. Now he is walking through the house and through the garden where the birch trees are bending over, hustled by the same wind that is howling here down the corridors. Look, look! Here he comes now driving at top speed with 2 black horses, and a carriage pushed by the wind with a great stir. Listen, it is here toward the south that he is being driven. It is to you he is coming. Your lover, yes, your lover. He is coming. Do you hear the gallop of his horses on the highway? He is coming. He is getting near. Yes, now he is reaching the outer limits of the hacienda. Now he is going around the lagoon and through the grounds. Now he is pulling up his carriage to the front of the main entrance, and here he is, entering the front door, which as usual has been left unlocked. And now, do you hear his steps sounding on the stones of the big hall? Do you hear them as he is coming up the stairs, coming through the corridors? Do you hear them, Elga? Yes, I was hearing them. I was actually hearing footsteps come through the corridors and towards my room. I could hear them getting nearer every second. And swayed by a sickening fear, quickly I raised myself on my pillows, but my trembling hand had not yet finished lighting the lamp at the side of the bed, when the door of the room was pushed open brutally from the outside. "Daniel!" I cried. "You frightened me," I added with a sigh. "Oh, I frightened you? I who had come back because I thought the storm might frighten you." He said it so pleasantly that I looked at him, not quite sure I could believe I had heard him right. There he was, soaked with rain, his curly hair sticking to his temples, and his boots all splattered with mud. "It was nice of you to come back in this weather," I said at last foolishly. There was silence. "You're glad that I came back then?" he asked, and he started to walk toward the bed with a smile on his lips. "Of course, Daniel, I'm glad." "But are you glad that I came back only because you were afraid of the storm?" "Oh, but you know I wasn't really afraid of the storm," I heard myself answering timidly. "Then you're glad that I came back because perhaps you missed me a little. Do you, Elga?" I was looking at him, overwhelmed by the sweetness in his voice. There he was, standing at the foot of the big bed. He looked handsome, he looked kind, and was almost asking me if I was in love with him. That was just the way it was to be. This was the moment for which I had been waiting ever since the day of our engagement, the moment when I was to tell him of my love for him. A great emotion swept over me, and I fell back on the pillows, suddenly overcome by a strange weakness. And all at once he was leaning over me there at the head of the bed. I felt his strong arms lifting me by the shoulders. My face was almost against his, and my lips close to his lips, when suddenly I noticed the expression in his eyes and felt his breath. His eyes were shining with a queer, uncanny light, and his breath was heavy with alcohol. I tore myself away violently from his arms, and as he was reaching out to take hold of me again, I slapped him hard in the face, screaming, "Get out!" He remained standing there before me, his fists clenched, his face very pale. "I hate you! Get out!" I cried again, and fell back sobbing on the pillows. When I lifted up my head dejectedly, he was no longer before me. The wind rushing through the door he had left open as he went out was rustling all the draperies in the room and causing the light of the lamp to flicker. Oh God, a whole night still to face, and that storm outside, and that other storm in my heart. Would there ever be any rest or happiness for me on earth? Yes, there would be. For when, completely exhausted, I finally dropped into sleep, I suddenly found myself under a big tree blossoming with golden flowers, swarming with humming-bees, and the song and the fragrance that emanated from this wonderful tree filled me instantly with great contentment, deep calm, and profound joy. And marveling, I realized that once more I was finding myself in the world of my dreams, under the tree of happiness that my mother so long ago had promised me I would find on earth. Ebba Hansen, smiling, frail, and tender, there she was again, making the same promise to me, as the light of dawn forced me once more to return to my sad life. 5. It was because of that promise that eagerly and almost joyously I found myself facing a day which was, in fact, to be so decisive in my destiny. The wind was still rushing right and left, tearing into the mist and chasing after it, blowing it relentlessly out of the forest, which I could see far off, throwing up smoke on all sides, like a great castle on fire. My curiosity stirred by this unusual sight, I wandered aimlessly for a long time through the countryside until I found myself all of a sudden at the edge of the lagoon. The wind was beating furiously against the reeds and sweeping away from the top of the water the mist, which seemed to be escaping toward the sky. Out in the middle of the lagoon I could now distinctly see the small islands with the great ferns where, as little Andrés had so often told me, the wild ducks had their abode. If he were here now, I thought, I'd be the one this time to suggest going to the islands. For that atmosphere of dread which heretofore had weighed on the lagoon seemed to have been swept away with the mist. No, little Andrés was not anywhere to be seen, yet his rowboat was there before me, lying in the mud close to the bank. I pushed it into the water, jumped in, and found myself rowing clumsily toward the islands before I had time to think that I had never done any rowing in my life. The water felt heavy, and I soon had to realize that the islands were farther than I had imagined. My arms were getting tired, and I was out of breath, so I let go of the oars and relaxed. It was then the thought came over me that at this very moment the rowboat was resting over the spot where... I shall always remember the sudden morbid curiosity which induced me to lean over the side of the boat, to look down into the waters, toward the muddy bottom, where death had been waiting to drag down Teresa's beautiful body. And never, never shall I forget the panic that overwhelmed me when, there in the depths, I saw something like a hand stirring a crazy whirl of air bubbles. From the murky bottom of the lagoon, a human body was now rising fast to the surface. With tight throat and taut muscles, I was just about ready to die of fright when the head and the smiling face of little Andres bounded out of the water in front of me. "Andres, my goodness, what are you doing there?" "Quiet," the child murmured as he gripped the side of the boat with one hand. "It's a secret." "A secret?" "Yes, I'm looking for the gold ring of Doña Teresa. I have been looking for it for months. There is nothing Don Daniel would not give to have that ring. He told me so himself. As I am a good diver, I will surely find it some day, and then I will exchange it for his beautiful silver spurs. But it's a secret. My sisters must not under any circumstances hear about it. They would be very much afraid." No longer was I listening to the boy, for all my attention had now been fixed on a carriage I had just seen appear at the edge of the lagoon. "Andres, look! Do you see anything over there?" I cried. "I see a carriage, señora, a town carriage drawn by 2 black horses," he answered, stretching his neck with much difficulty above the aquatic plants. "If Don Daniel could see it, he would surely take a shot at it. You know he has forbidden strangers to go across the hacienda," he added, while, to my amazement, I realized that the carriage, which, in my fanciful imagining of the night before, my lover had taken to come to me, was there at the edge of the lagoon under a cluster of willow trees. And now, oh my God, it seemed my lover was actually there too. Yes, there he was, looking out of the window of the carriage. I could see him plainly. Even that far away my eyes could recognize with joy his handsome profile. And as I started to call him, "Landa! Landa!" I could see him waving his hand at me gaily. So he had come, as I had secretly desired him to. He had come. He was there. He loved me. He loved me. The report of a gun, was suddenly heard over the lagoon, and flocks of wild ducks rising from all sides blinded me for a long while with their frightened wings. "It is Don Daniel," murmured little Andres, vanishing under the water as quickly as he had appeared. I took hold of the oars again, but as I rowed back, I soon observed that my friend's carriage no longer could be seen under the willows. The silhouette of Daniel, however, stood out there motionless at the very edge of the bank. Carrying a shotgun on his shoulder, he seemed to be waiting for me threateningly. "Well done, well done," I heard him a little later sneering as I struggled through the reeds with my rowboat. And his sneering turned into noisy, sarcastic laughter when, as I attempted to jump ashore, I fell awkwardly face down in the mud. I can still see him firmly set on his feet right in front of me, laughing and not making the slightest move to help me. "Coward!" I heard myself crying out at him, almost in tears from rage and humiliation. "Ha ha ha! I can see you were not lying last night when you said that you hate me." I kept silent as I picked myself up and tried as best I could to shake the mud out of my clothes. Then, angrily, I started to walk toward the path leading to the house. But there he suddenly came at me again. "Tell me, Elga, it must make you suffer a lot to live in the same house with someone you do not love." "And what about you? Does it not make you suffer?" I answered bitterly, and, much to my surprise, my remarks seemed to turn his irony to heavy silence. My triumph, however, was short-lived. I can still see him with his long, quiet stride catching up with my little hurried, nervous steps as I walked toward the house. "Listen, Elga, to be frank, it does hurt my feelings to have constantly before my eyes a girl as ugly and thin as you are. So, after all, considering you don't love me either, why shouldn't we separate?" But where would I go? That exclamation, for which Daniel was waiting, never reached my lips, however, for no sooner had it presented itself to my mind than the evil voice of temptation was already singing in me. "Where? But just 2 steps from here, Elga, at the hunting lodge of the Navarres, where Landa surely at this very moment is waiting for you. Why shouldn't you ask him to take you away with him? He would take you away, and you would live hidden in his old house behind the beautiful abandoned garden, and your love would be his whole life, his own secret, and in his arms your nights would be one long, perfect night of happiness." "Separate? Yes, after all, why not?" I declared pensively. And my answer seemed to nail him down to the ground for the second time. "May I inquire if it is to your Aunt Mercedes that you would ask for shelter when you leave me?" he asked, however, a few seconds later, again drawing close to my side. "You know quite well that she has rejected me and told me to leave her house," I answered calmly. "That is too bad, for I do not think that your Aunt Adelaida would receive in her house a woman estranged from her husband." "I don't think so either, Daniel." He laughed again. "So perhaps it is to the linen room of the convent that you expect to offer your talents. But you know, my poor Elga, I'm very much afraid that you would be turned down from there also for the same reason Aunt Adelaida would not take you in her house. So after all, in any case, I would have you back again on my hands." "Certainly not, Daniel, for if I left you, I would be going away with someone who under no circumstances would want to send me back to you." "Not really?" "Yes, a man who's in love with me. Do you hear?" And as I stopped, I looked Daniel straight in the face. He stared at me silently for a while, and then burst out with that same laugh which had humiliated me so greatly when I fell on the bank. "Very well, Elga," he said, "but I think it would be better for you to wash your face before you go out and meet your loving ghost." "It's not a ghost," I snapped back, this time seized with a rage such as I had never experienced in my life. "It's not a ghost. His name is Landa." "Landa?" "Yes, Landa. And he is handsome, intelligent, and kind, 100 times more so than you are." "Landa? Why, of course. Isn't he my sister's friend? I mean the one who once before picked you up in the mud a little while ago in the forest?" "Yes," I cried, completely outraged. "Yes, but it did not prevent him from finding me prettier than all the beautiful women he had ever met in his life. Yes, you can laugh, if you will, and tell me again that I am thin and ugly. I don't care now. But to him I am slender, beautiful, attractive, and my hair smells of jasmine, and my skin is soft to the touch, and—" "Don't be ridiculous, Elga," interrupted Daniel. "You speak of this man as if he had been your lover." "He has been my lover," I declared forcefully. "And when was that? In your dreams?" "No, not in my dreams. The night of the ball he was my lover," I said, and standing near Daniel, now motionless, I waited for the cataclysm such a confession must inevitably bring forth. But no, nothing at all happened. There was a silence, and then, "The night of the ball? But how? At what time? "Tell me," Daniel finally inquired calmly as he resumed his walk. And I had to follow him, astounded, actually speechless with astonishment, in the face of his failure to react. "All right, then, go ahead. Tell us about your night at the ball, my dear Cinderella. So, when the great clock at the palace sounded the 12 strokes of midnight, what did you do?" However, at that moment my indignation, once more reawakened by Daniel's everlasting mockery, gave me back the use of my voice. "When the great clock sounded midnight," I continued, "all the lights went out in the house of Mariana, and I went with Landa through the little iron gate in the garden. Outside the nightingales were singing, and you kissed in the moonlight," Daniel sneered. "No, there was heavy mist," I continued, trembling with controlled rage. "And we walked until we reached a house—" "A house of mist, of course." "No, a real house. His house. It was very near, just walking up an alley and crossing a square, and I was in his home, in his room, in his arms, until daybreak." "Wonderful. But tell me, at daybreak, how did you manage to get back?" "How? It's very simple. Once more I went across the square, walked down the alley, and came in again through the little iron gate, the same way I had left." "And nobody noticed anything?" "Nobody. Outside there was a mist, and inside there was a certain gleam of the candelabras. So I came in and walked up the stairs, went to our room, got myself undressed, slipped into bed, and fell asleep." "And woke up, you should say." "Why?" I answered, stamping the ground with my foot. "Because, I imagine, this is the way all dreams come to an end." I could not help shrugging my shoulders with a sort of superior contempt. "My dear Elga, even if all you have just told me was not a dream, still your whole story could not stand up because of one insignificant detail." "Which one?" "Me." "You? How? What do you mean?" "I want to remind you that even though I do not love you, yet I'm not the kind of a husband that would let my wife run up and down the streets with a lover." "But you were asleep," I answered with a nervous laugh. "I was asleep? Me?" And for the first time since this scene had begun, I saw Daniel react. Taking hold of my wrists, he compelled me to look at him, while he spoke with a harsh thrust on each word. "Perhaps you have forgotten that when the lights went out, you came upstairs and knocked at my door before you departed with your imaginary lover." "Yes, I remember it well, and I also remember that you failed to open the door and kept on sleeping," I added spitefully, now vaguely conscious that I had at last found the spring that could shake him in his self-confidence. I had made the right guess. "I did not keep on sleeping," Daniel cried in a sharp voice, pushing me back violently. I stumbled on the pathway, and my head struck the trunk of a tree. "And what did you do then?" I shouted, unable any longer to stand his brutal manners. "What did you do, my dear husband? Open the door to me, watch me go to bed, and make sure that I did not go out walking the streets with a lover?" "Exactly," he cried out like a madman. "I don't remember that," I laughed. "How could you remember it, since you had had too much champagne?" It was my turn to protest frantically. "That's not true." And in the face of my anger, the anger of Daniel seemed to vanish as if by magic. "You certainly don't deny that you had champagne to drink?" he asked in a bland voice, looking as though he was enjoying my indignation. "Not enough to lose my memory," I answered, trying to recover my self-control. "That's what you think. When one has never taken any champagne before, and then one takes a little too much, even if it's done in a casual way, Elga, it's quite possible to lose the memory of anything done later." "But certainly that was not my case." "It may have been more your case than you think. Elga, considering you took champagne while you were already tired out by a long journey and in a state of excitement brought on by that silly ball." "But what are you trying to prove to me?" "Nothing, except to make you realize that when you came to knock on my door, you were absolutely drunk," he concluded rudely. "Liar! Didn't Amanda tell you?" "Tell me what?" "That the champagne you took had gone to your head to such an extent that you did not even see when she helped you to come up the stairs, and she walked with you to my door." "Amanda?" I was looking at him, trying to figure out what he was aiming at. "Yes, Amanda. Wasn't she watching the ball from the top of the main staircase?" "Yes, but she went to bed as soon as the lights went out. She told me herself." "She went to bed as soon as the lights went out, but only after she helped you upstairs and brought you to my door." "It's not possible. She would have told me." "She probably has more decency than you, who seems to think it perfectly natural to drink too much champagne, to lose all notion of what you were doing, and then to dream that you were running away with a lover." I did not answer, feeling suddenly a strange tightening in the heart, and silently we resumed our walk toward the house. Amanda! When she was telling her sisters the story of the ball, or commenting on it with me, she never ceased repeating how lovely I had looked, and how happy I had seemed when over and over again I went by dancing under the banister of the stairway, where she stood watching. Then she would tell how, when all the lights went out, she had gone to bed in order to keep forever clear in her memory the picture of that superb, bright spectacle the ball had been up to that moment. If she had helped me to go upstairs and had walked with me to the door of my room, she had never once said one word to me about it. No, never. I was reflecting. I noticed now that Daniel was observing me stealthily, with a sort of strange curiosity. Instantly a new light entered my mind. "You're lying," I said to him. "You're making a mockery of me and my love. Any falsehood you can think of is good enough for you, so long as you know it can offend me in what is dearest to my heart." "My poor girl," Daniel answered. "We're at the house now. Just call Amanda and ask her about the whole thing. You will find out soon enough that I'm not lying to you." He laughed, and again I kept silent, feeling once more in my heart the same strange uneasiness I had already felt a while before. Then, as I entered the house and hurried to the first floor in search of Amanda, my thoughts made my uneasiness grow into real anguish. If it was true that, on the night of the ball, Amanda had helped me go upstairs, then Daniel was right in asserting that the champagne had really made me go unconscious, for, actually, I had never seen Amanda. And if I had lost consciousness sufficiently to be unable to see her, or even to know or remember that she had helped me to the stairway and along the corridors up to the door of our room, then Daniel might possibly be right also when he claimed that he had opened the door, and that it had been in my bed and in my dreams that I had lived my beautiful adventure with Landa. "Amanda, here you are at last." "My goodness, Señora, what have you been up to? You have mud right up to the end of your nose." "Yes, I fell down. Please come and let me take off your clothes and your shoes. What a shame! How did you ever get yourself in such a mess?" "At the edge of the lagoon. Listen, Amanda, why didn't you ever tell me that you helped me to go upstairs the night of the ball, and that the champagne had affected me?" "Well, it seems that Don Daniel now wants to spoil the pleasant memory you had of your only ball. Don't let him annoy you that way, Señora. You are much too nice to him. It's a shame." "But, Amanda, tell me, is it true you helped me to go upstairs?" "Why, of course it's true. And what of it? What difference can it possibly make to you? Nobody noticed it in all that excitement and in the darkness, and you had been perfect up to that point. A real queen of beauty. What's happening to you? Oh my God, Señora, you're not going to make yourself unhappy over that foolishness, I hope." No, no," I protested, trying to conceal my misery. "But why didn't you ever mention all this to me?" "That's the point exactly, because I did not want to spoil your recollection of the ball as Don Daniel is doing right now. Here, here, Let me put your blue dress on now. The cold weather is over, you know, and the mist seems to be clearing up for good. Spring is here." "Yes, spring is here," I repeated in a dull voice, not finding enough strength to help her get me dressed. Now, Señora. Turn around so I can button you up in the back. That's it. Thanks. Besides, you should have no regrets on account of leaving the ball at the time you did, for in the light of the candelabra, it seems, things didn't go so well. About half the guests left as soon as the lights went out. Yes, from the top of my attic I watched so many carriages going off. I even stayed at the window more than 1 hour before going to bed, as I wanted to get a good idea of what the big city was like. So many roofs there under me, so many gaslights. But, Amanda, how could you see through the mist?" "What mist?" "Don't you remember the heavy mist that night?" "Mist? There wasn't any mist, Señora. Besides, I am told that there practically never is any mist at all up there." "You must have been dreaming about the mist here, most likely. But now, Clara is calling you downstairs. Remember, this is Saturday and Don Daniel is lunching at home, Señora. You'd better go right down before he starts to get impatient," Amanda concluded. And I obeyed her mechanically, unable to articulate a single word. "The mist? You must have been dreaming about the mist here." No, that wasn't possible. I couldn't have been dreaming. That terrible, marvelous adventure, the guilty memory of which I had never been able to put aside, that night of love, every detail of which remained more vivid in my memory than the most important events in all my life. It couldn't have been a dream. That wasn't possible. Someone must be mistaken. There must be some kind of monstrous error somewhere, I was saying to myself as I sat down at the end of the long dining table, facing Daniel. "What a face!" he cried, giving me an insolent look. "The very mask of tragedy. I need not ask you the result of your inquiries upstairs." Then, all at once, my power of resistance collapsed. "Daniel," I pleaded in a low voice, at last setting aside all my pride. "Daniel, tell me, is it really true that you opened the door to me when I came up and knocked after all the lights had gone out?" "Yes, of course, I opened the door to you." "Well then, it is really true that I slept all night in our room by your side. Is it true, Daniel? Tell me, I beg of you. Can it be that Lando was never my lover?" "Of course he never was, for in that case he surely wouldn't be alive today. Who do you think I am, anyway, Elga?" "Then it was all a dream. It's not possible. It's not possible." "On the contrary, it's more than possible. All your life you have lived in dreams rather than in reality. And wasn't it exactly what took place at the beginning of our friendship? Do you remember Prince Toad, the one with the little gold crown on his head, and one you always made me look in the garden for, like an idiot? Do you remember?" "Oh, my God, my God!" I moaned, entirely crushed by his arguments, and then burst into tears. For a few moments Daniel, amazed, watched me crying loudly. Then, "Stop it!" he exclaimed, hitting the table with both fists. Frightened by the violence of his outbursts, I stopped crying. A silence followed, during which we both endeavored to regain our self-control. "By the way, Elga, this seems to be the first time you care whether one of your dreams is real or not," he said at last, very coldly. "Yes, I do care. I really do care," I murmured, holding back my tears with great difficulty. You do care," Daniel repeated, staring at me with irritation. Then suddenly, striking his forehead, he remarked in a voice once more wide awake and mocking, "Why, certainly, of course you care, for after all, how could I have forgotten it?
A little while ago you wanted to leave me to join that gentleman. Dear me, what a surprise the poor fellow would have had seeing you suddenly arrive, throwing yourself in his arm, and—" But now it was my turn to interrupt Daniel in his sarcastic vein, with a great joyous outburst. For, dear God, how could I have forgotten it? Landa had actually come, had actually called me from his carriage near the lagoon a little while earlier, and was surely waiting for me right now at the hunting lodge of the Nevers. Would he have come, and would he have dared call to me if there had not been that night between us? Daniel was lying. Since he was not willing to admit a thing which wounded his pride, he must be lying. Where his lies began, where they ended, I could not say, for it was obviously true, according to Amanda, that the champagne had to some extent made me lose control of my actions. But he was lying when he insisted that my night of love was nothing but a dream, and I was going to prove it to him at once. I got up from the table. "Where are you going now?" "To order the carriage." "What for?" "What for? To go to Landa, of course, and throw myself in his arms as you suggest." He looked at me for a moment without saying a word, then roared with laughter. "Do you expect to go all the way to the capital with my horses and carriage?" "No, only as far as the hunting lodge of the Nevers, right here, next door." "To the lodge?" "Yes, to the lodge, where Landa arrived in the carriage, at which you fired a few shots this morning at the edge of the lagoon. Why do you look at me like that? Are you going to try to convince me now that I've been dreaming again?" "Dreaming what?" "That there was a carriage under the willows, and that you shot at it." Another silence followed, during which Daniel continued to look at me without making any answer. "Well, what's the matter now? What's happening?" I inquired, moved in spite of myself by his attitude. "It so happens that I did not shoot at any carriages this morning," he answered at last. "What were you shooting at then?" "At the flamingos. They arrived here a few days ago. For a long time I've made up my mind to get one of them mounted for the house." "Then, according to you, there wasn't any carriage under the willows, and it was just another dream of mine? Is that what you mean?" I inquired insolently. "No, this time it wasn't a dream. It was just a vision you had," he answered calmly. "Because, as a matter of fact, it is quite impossible for a carriage to have been there under the willows." "And why is that, if you please?" "Because I'm going back to the lagoon right now to catch those flamingos. If you'll come with me, I'll show you why."
6. How can I explain the confusion, the anguish that overwhelmed me while I was following Daniel to the lagoon, and that feeling I had of carrying on a cruel game begun by him when we were children? Yes, it was just the same then as it was now, when I had to defend my dreams against the skeptical and destructive spirit of little Daniel. "Listen, Elga, you were telling me that there was a toad with a golden crown on his head right under this stone." "Yes, of course." "Well, look. I have just lifted the stone and there isn't anything there." "Then it must be somewhere else, on a visit to the fairies, perhaps." "It isn't true. He is not at the fairies or anywhere else, because there is no such toad anywhere." "Listen, Elga, you were telling me that there under the big white seashells one could always find some little siren with green hair." "Yes, surely." "Well, all this month I spent at the seashore with Uncle Manuel. Every time I went down to the beach, I turned over all the white seashells I saw, but never found any little siren under them." "Perhaps they weren't the right seashells you were turning over." "It isn't so. What happened was that no little sirens ever existed except in your imagination." "Listen, Elga, you were telling me that you had seen a carriage under the trees," he was saying to me now. "Yes." "Well then, look at those willow trees over there and tell me if a carriage could have ever stopped under them." For a certain length of time, I do not know how long, I stood there, silent and motionless, at Daniel's side, unwilling to believe what my eyes actually saw. The willows! Only their heads could be seen. Their trunks were almost entirely under the water of the lagoon, greatly swollen by winter thaws. And it was, in fact, practically impossible for a carriage not only to have stopped under the trees, but even to have gotten near the spot where the willows stood, without having been stuck in the mud. Now are you convinced that the carriage never existed, and that you only had a vision? I did not answer. I was overcome. Look, someone is moving about in Andres's rowboat, Daniel exclaimed. Andres! 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 I cried, all my hopes suddenly bursting out once more in a great flash. Andres had seen the carriage too, Daniel. It couldn't have been a vision, for he had seen it too. Was Andres with you? Yes and no. He was swimming over there by the islands when— He was swimming by the islands? Interrupted Daniel. Why? What was he doing there? He was looking for Teresa's ring, I explained, thoughtlessly betraying Andres in my anxiety to get quickly to the bottom of things. But Daniel was no longer listening to me. Hey, you! Who gave you permission to go through by the lagoon? He cried to a peasant who suddenly appeared before us. I have forbidden all of you people from the lodge to enter my grounds. If you want to be in the service of my sister, that's your business. But I order you not to use my roads or go across my hacienda. Well, well, of course you must be right, Don Daniel, the peasant answered in a dignified manner. However, you might consider that it is very hard for us to travel that long roundabout way. That's no reason to break down the locks of my tranqueras and to come over to shoot my ducks. Oh no, Don Daniel. Sometimes we may jump over your tranqueras, but nobody has ever thought of going after your ducks. Well then, tell me what those men are doing down there in Andres's rowboat. When we were going by on our way to the village, we saw the boys swimming over there, and then, when we got back on our way to the lodge, we saw this, the peasant concluded, showing us the vest, the linen trousers, and the sandals of little Andres, all scattered on the ground among the reeds. There was a silence. Then, continued the peasant, we came to the conclusion that it wasn't natural he should be in the water for so long, and, besides, we couldn't see him any more. So my two friends decided to take the boat to go and see what was happening at the spot where we had seen him swimming. But surely he must be on one of the islands. That's where he was resting between one dive and the next, I exclaimed. Well then, why didn't he answer when we called him? Replied the peasant. But still, Oh, shut up, Elga, Daniel nervously interrupted, stamping the ground with his foot. And yet I had absolutely forbidden him to do any more diving. Once already he almost drowned himself, and now he wants to start it all over again. But why? I was saying, when Daniel impatiently explained. Don't you know, there is a maze of aquatic plants with long roots there. There, where you know, he concluded, and then suddenly he walked away toward the banks of the lagoon. I remained alone with the peasant who, visibly embarrassed, was watching from the corner of his eye his two companions in the rowboat near the islands. You were from the lodge? I heard myself inquiring, my heart beating hard. Yes, señora. There are people staying there now, aren't there? No, señora. Didn't Mr. Landa arrive there this morning? No, señora. No one arrived. Besides, the Countess has just written, asking us to close the house entirely. Are you sure? Are you sure nobody arrived there this morning? Well, I should certainly know, señora, for I'm the steward of the house. See here, Lisandro, Daniel was crying out to the man while retracing his steps. It looks as though your companions are making signs to us from over there where the boy was swimming. Yes, of course. And they seemed to be leaning over, as though they had discovered something. Oh, dear Lord, I hope that little brat of an Andres has not done the trick and gotten himself drowned. Yes, that little brat of an Andres, as the peasant had said, had done the trick and gotten himself drowned. And it was in his own rowboat that his poor little body, half naked, his hair heavily covered with mud, was brought back. Andres, Andres, Andres! I knelt down. I dared to touch his icy forehead. I dared to touch his hand with its strangely tightened fist. And I was still calling to him, Andres, Andres, Andres! But he did not answer. Forever silenced was the only voice that could have said, Of course not. The señora did not have a vision. I, too, have seen the carriage. And now that he was being carried away by Daniel, and now that all of them were gone, lying there among the reeds, I understood at last that that night of love which my conscience had rejected had nevertheless been the only source of patience, that it was because of its burning memory that I had accepted to live and to grow old without any hope of happiness in that deserted spot forever surrounded by the mist. For now that I knew all was but a dream, life to me seemed no more than a long, dull, purposeless road along which in time I would become old and die, without ever having known love. Daniel had gone away without casting a single look of mercy on me and on my despair. Yes, through my pitiful confession, I had even destroyed all possibility of a future between us. Only shame, sadness, and emptiness of life were to be my future. What was the use, then, for me to live? It would be 100 times better to die, yes, to die, rather than become one of those derelicts the stream of life carries away. After all, it would be so easy, just to go back to the lagoon, walk into the water, until I should lose my footing, then nothing. Nobody would come to stop me, to rescue me from those muddy waters, haunted by sorrow. But somehow I was mistaken. Many years have passed since those events I am now relating, and yet distinctly in my memory I can still hear the great heart-rending cry which reached me at the very moment I was letting myself go under the water, after I had lost my footing. Elga! No! Stop! The voice of Daniel was crying out, just a second too late. 7. And now, in order to obtain a clue to future events still to be unfolded in this story, my reader will have to take leave of me and go back 1 hour to Daniel as he was carrying the dead body of little Andres into the house. Poor child! It was on the stone table in the main hall that they laid his body so thin and cold. And there he remained, stretched out, his eyelids half open on pupils death was beginning to dim. It was when Daniel was getting ready to close those eyelids that the footsteps of the 3 sisters were heard coming all at once on a wild run. For a long while a terrifying silence held sway around the table. Andresito, one of them said at last softly. And Daniel saw them bustling around the body of the drowned boy, as if he were a sick child or one asleep. Andres, poor Andresito! Oh my God, it isn't possible! Andres, what have you done? And as one of them closed his eyes, and another pushed back a muddy lock of hair and kissed him on the forehead, the third, it was Clara, was taking the right hand of her little brother in her own so that she might loosen its fingers still strangely held in a tight grip. Then something dropped out of his partially opened fist and rolled down on the stone floor. A ring! Teresa's gold ring! Clara cried out in a strident voice, after Daniel had picked it up and showed it to them in his outstretched palm. A curse on it! A curse on it! She kept repeating hysterically. It was she who killed him. It was she who lured him to the bottom of the lagoon to kill him, while all the while we were loyal to her. We were keeping her frightful secret. We were protecting her with our silence and our prayers, protecting her soul already damned. No, no, Clara, interrupted Serena. in a sort of agonized exultation. "You are wrong, Clara. It was not Teresa who killed Andresito. It was God himself. It was God punishing us for having kept the secret of her crime, for having actually protected wickedness against innocence. God." "Calm yourself, Serena," Amanda put in. "Both of you, keep quiet." "No, Amanda. God wants us to speak. Look how he has used Andres' hand to bring out the truth. Speak. You must speak. He was just telling us when he made the ring fall at our feet. Why do you keep silent?" "Because we love Daniel. That is why we kept silent," Amanda suddenly put in impetuously. "And not to keep the secret of that unworthy woman. God knows it, therefore. He could not have wanted to punish us for attempting to save Daniel so much suffering." "Yes, but also we kept silent because we were afraid," Clara once more interposed in that same strident voice, as if possessed. "We were afraid of the ghost of Teresa, afraid of her vengeance, afraid that she might show herself to us as she shows herself at night on the lagoon. We were afraid of her tormented soul. Admit it now, Amanda." "No, no." "I dare you to say no again. I dare you to swear it here before the dead body of your own brother." Then, after casting a distracted look on the body of little Andres, Amanda burst into tears and ran out of the room, while Daniel followed her, almost screaming. "What do you know that could have made me suffer? Speak! What has Teresa done? Tell me!" Amanda had dropped on one of the benches in the anteroom and was now sobbing heavily. "We have always loved you as a brother, Daniel, even though you are now the master," she moaned, taking Daniel's hand and speaking to him suddenly in the old familiar way, as they used to when they were children playing together. "I am your brother," Daniel exclaimed, deeply moved. "I have always loved you, in spite of my disagreeable manners. And little Andres, whom I have so often treated badly, I really loved him very much." "It was Teresa who killed him," spoke again the inexorable voice of Clara, just then appearing on the threshold, accompanied by Serena. "You are the eldest, and it is by right your privilege to tell Daniel the truth about Teresa. But if you don't do it, then Serena and I will tell him." "But speak, all of you," burst out Daniel. "Teresa, my poor Teresa, what is this terrible thing they are accusing you of?" "Of never having loved you," Amanda said then in a solemn, trembling voice. "Of never having loved me?" Daniel repeated. "Yes, she said to us over and over again 1,000 times that she did not love you, and she was always sobbing when she said it. She used to cry all day long when you were not in the house. She was in love with someone else. That's what she told us, Daniel." "Yes, someone else who did not want to marry her, and that's why she married you, on account of spite, and also because you were so rich. That's what she told us, Daniel." "It's not true. It's not possible," Daniel said, struggling not to believe them. "You're mistaken, or else you're insane. Why are you making all this up?" "We're not making anything up. She told all of this to us herself." "It's not true. If it were true, it's not to you she would have told all this. She would have been crazy to do it, just as crazy as you all are, this very moment." "Crazy, yes, she was crazy. So crazy that she went out to kill herself." "Kill herself? Kill herself, you say? And of course she also told you that she was going to kill herself." Daniel shouted now like a man out of his mind. "No," Serena snapped back. "She did not tell us, but the morning of the day she was drowned, she asked me to sing the plaint of the young girl adrift on the waters, sobbing because of an unhappy love. Aguas abajo, boga una niña, boga diciendo, se va mi amor. Down the river, a girl is rowing, rowing and singing, farewell, my love." That's what the first stanza said, but it was the third stanza that she asked me to sing to her that morning, to sing again and again. Do you remember the third stanza of that song, Daniel? No, 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 I don't remember anything. You're crazy. Go away. I don't want to hear any more. You must. You have to know, for your own good, Daniel, for the sake of Elga. Listen, this is what the third stanza says. Aguas abajo, la hallaron muerta, ahogada y fría, quiso morir. Down the river they found her dead, drowned and cold, she wished to die. She wished to die. Do you hear, Daniel? She wished to die. Yes, Daniel was hearing. From the depth of his memory, the cry of the plaint was now coming up within himself, and also the memory of many other things on which he could not help passing judgment with a clearness such as he had never known before. Adios, adios, quiso morir. Adios, adios, quiso morir. Farewell, farewell, she wished to die. Farewell, farewell, she wished to die. Teresa, her silences, her lack of confidence, and her haughtiness toward him, he had accepted as proof of discretion, reserve, and natural pride in a being so prodigiously beautiful. Perhaps, after all, they were only a threefold manifestation of her profound indifference to him, and that terror, which came over her at night as he was caressing her, which he had thought to be bashfulness, might have been the denial of all her being. And, who knows, perhaps it was sorrow which, in less than a month of marriage, had made her lose weight to such an extent that all her clothes became loose at the waist, and her rings fell from her fingers. Even her wedding ring, that ring which was different from all other wedding rings because the name of the betrothed had been inscribed inside by the bride herself. Ah, that smile with which she had taken hold of the needle on the morning of the wedding, and had carried out that daring, charming gesture. And suddenly possessed by this latest recollection, You're lying, all three of you," Daniel said, as he raised to his lips the hand in which he was holding tightly the precious ring. "Teresa loved me, and the proof of it is inside this ring." "Yes, it is inside the ring. It is inside the ring, the proof that she did not love you. Daniel, look at the name she inscribed inside the ring." "Yes, look inside the ring, Daniel." "She did not love you. Look inside the ring, Daniel." They were moving up on him, all three of them, like three gloomy archangels sent forward by the inexorable God of justice. "Look inside the ring." Daniel moved close to the high windows, raised the ring to the light, and started to decipher the name which had been hastily inscribed on the inside with the point of my needle. D-A, he began to spell. Then suddenly he felt as if struck by a bolt of lightning. V-I-D, he concluded, reading only by a superhuman effort. David! That was the name Teresa had inscribed inside the ring, which he was to place on her finger in front of the altar. That was the name she carried in her heart when she married him, the name she must have had on her lips when she killed herself. He ran to the door, opened it, fitfully drew a deep breath of air as if to save himself from choking, and finally let himself drop down on the stone steps of the outer staircase. "She did not love me," he murmured. "She did not love me," he kept repeating in a dead voice, until Amanda found at last the courage to go to him. "She did not love you, but Elga loves you," she said. He shook his head with an absent-minded look. "Yes, Elga loves you. She has always loved you, to the point of self-denial and self-sacrifice. She kept silent as we did, and hid the truth from you, as she thought she was hiding it from us, the truth in regard to that woman for whom you spurned her so cruelly." Abruptly, Daniel seemed to come back to life. "Elga knew it?" he asked, lifting his head. Yes, Daniel, she knew it, and it was Teresa herself who told us she knew it. 8. Yes, I knew. But God is my witness that never, never even in the shadow of a thought that I might tell Daniel what I knew, came to my mind. I knew, but I had even forgotten what I knew, so great was the conviction anchored in me that the revelation of the scene I had witnessed would break Daniel's heart forever. And now, after so many years have passed, I cannot even recall without a feeling of anguish that dreadful scene in which I can see Teresa back from church in her magnificent wedding gown. Now you should make a brief appearance in the reception room, and then come straight upstairs as soon as you can and put on your traveling dress. Aunt Mercedes feverishly was instructing her daughter, who stood motionless in front of the mirror of her own room. Even though it is disappointing to your guests, Daniel told me he wanted you to be ready to leave early. Now, Elga, hurry and pick up your cousin's train, and go downstairs with her. In the meantime, I will get your bags ready. Oh, my goodness, Teresa, how beautiful you look! Did you know that when you made your entrance in the church on your father's arms, people were moved to tears? And did you notice that outside the church there was a mob scene as you came out? I imagine that never happened to that little Viana girl, even though she became a countess. That little upstart, who did not even take the trouble to come to her brother's wedding. Leave me alone, Elga, cried out Teresa in an altered voice as, obeying Aunt Mercedes, I was bending over to pick up her train. Very pale, her eyes blazing, she was shaking from head to foot. My dear girl, what is it? Aunt Mercedes asked, coming forward eagerly. And you too, leave me alone. Both of you, leave me alone. Teresa cried out once more as she burst into heavy sobs. My poor darling, what's the matter? Dear Lord, she must be all tired out. Perhaps her nerves had gone back on her. Elga, go quick and fetch me the orange flower water you'll find on my dressing table. After that, go downstairs and call Daniel. Daniel? What for? Teresa cried out with a start. But he's your husband. No, he's not my husband. And what's more, I don't want to go away with him. See here, Teresa, see here, my little girl, stammered Aunt Mercedes. Why do you say that? Why? Why? Because you know as well as I do that I do not love him. Now look here, Aunt Mercedes said, throwing a sidelong glance of deep anxiety in my direction. If you had not been in love with that young man, you certainly would never have married him. The trouble with you is you're overtired. To have to sit for all those photographs has— Now go on, Elga. Go and do what I asked you to do. No, stay here, Elga. I want you to stay. If you go downstairs to call Daniel, I will throw myself out of the window, Teresa moaned, whereupon she threw herself on the bed and started to weep loudly. Lock the door, Elga. Someone is coming, Aunt Mercedes commanded. And you, mother, go away, I beg of you. Go away. I want to be alone with Elga. Oh, please go away. As you wish, my dear, Aunt Mercedes replied dryly, recovering her self-control as if by magic. Anyway, I was rather anticipating all this. One should never expect any gratitude from one's children. Of course, that's the way life is. However, I beg of you, think of your poor father, Teresa. On account of him, you cannot go on acting this way. You might kill him. All right, mother. I promise I'll try to get over it. But please let me cry all I want now, by myself. Oh, please leave me alone, please. Lying in the folds of her long veil, her beautiful hair entwined with orange blossoms half undone on the pillow, Teresa, prostrate on her own maiden's bed, was sobbing violently as I came over to sit down by her side. Is it true that you do not love Daniel? I asked her sorrowfully. I do not love him, Elga. I love someone else. I love a man who did not want to marry me. And there, in the agony of her despair and in her need of someone to talk to, Teresa revealed her sad secret to me. She did not love Daniel. She loved someone else. A man, worldly, handsome, rich, attractive, intelligent, with whom she had danced that entire season of her triumph in town. No, I did not know him. She never had spoken to me about him, because she never talked to anyone about anything that really mattered to her. Yes, she had met him at some other ball, not at Aunt Adelaida's, for he never would have bothered to go to Aunt Adelaida's. He was a foreigner, a man much sought after, too brilliant to waste his time with old maids or with young girls. Yes, he really hated young girls. They said of him that he was a born bachelor. Yet with her he was different. He had shown his interest in her publicly, and had courted her, and this had caused as great a sensation as her beauty. In fact, all the women were jealous of her. If she had married him, she would have become a social queen, not only in the smart set in this country, but also in all the capitals of Europe, where he surely would have taken her after their wedding. But that was not all. If she had married him, she would at the same time have been the happiest woman in the world, for she had fallen madly in love with him from the very moment when he had bowed to her asking for the first waltz. But the social season was waning, and her admirer still was not making his proposal. What seemed worse, he even carefully avoided the smallest gesture, the slightest word that might involve him either in a formal or a personal way. Never any flowers, any letters, or any invitation other than a conventional one, never any private aside except in full view of many people. Women were beginning to smile unkindly behind their fans when they saw her waltzing with him. Yet he was in love with her. Yes, she was quite sure of it. She could see it in his eyes when he came running up to her in the lobby of the theatre, at the races, or out walking. She felt it in the trembling of his arm when they were dancing together. "My dear girl," Aunt Adelaida had said to her one morning, "many times I have told you that you should not keep all your smiles for that foreigner. Here he is going back to Europe next week. Someone just told me. No doubt with the intention of being very unpleasant, as you may readily imagine. You know, I have always very much disliked having your name coupled so often with the name of a man who has no principles and no religion." That was my answer. "And so good riddance to him. I'm tired of seeing him all the time around you. It's on account of him that you're losing all your opportunities for a brilliant marriage. Everybody can see you only have eyes for him." "Is it true that you're going back to Europe next week?" Teresa had asked her admirer that very evening while they were dancing. "How could I ever leave a city where you are?" was his answer, and then, looking into her eyes, "And you, tell me, would you ever become resigned to not dancing with me any more?" "I'm going home tomorrow to my family in the province," she answered quickly, not realizing exactly what had made her tell him this lie. "It's not possible!" he exclaimed. And seeing him for the first time about to lose his self-control, Teresa knew her woman's instinct had made her strike in the right place. "Yet nothing could be nearer the truth," she said, laughing. For a while he remained silent as they glided in close embrace to the rhythm of the music. "Well, then, I will have to go to your province too, Teresa." "There are no dances there, David." "But there's you, Teresa, darling." She almost fainted with happiness. He had said, "Teresa, darling." "However, I do hope you will change your mind and decide not to go," he added, once more in a frivolous mood, as the waltz was coming to an end. She did not change her mind, and it was the reason for that sudden departure which had alienated Aunt Adelaida's friendship for ever. She went back to her province feeling quite sure that the handsome foreigner, unable to live without seeing her, would not fail to come and ask for her hand. But the days went by, and he did not come. It is true that he wrote to her clever, amusing letters, that she read anxiously and tore up in a temper without answering them. In the meantime Daniel was there, Daniel, whose love for her I myself had revealed to her only a few weeks earlier. Daniel, always silent, but still in love. Daniel, not quite so shy, and now the overlord of a vast domain. The best match in all the South! What do you expect, after all, Teresa? Really, this girl is quite mad, Aunt Mercedes kept lamenting. She is as crazy as a March hare. There at Adelaida's she was turning down one marriage proposal after another, and here— No, Arturo, the situation is becoming serious. I feel sure she will eventually be an old maid. And what selfishness! Just think, by making that little sacrifice of marrying a young man, handsome, intelligent, serious, and well brought up like Daniel, she could save us from such a dreary existence and help us out of poverty. Yes, poverty, Teresa, do you hear? Your father finds himself unable to pay the mortgage. Very well, mother. I will marry Daniel Viana. Teresa, under the spell of some strange desperate idea, suddenly announced one day. Made to realize, on hearing of her engagement, that he was running the risk of losing her forever, the handsome foreigner, surely, would come to break up everything and take her back for his own. That was her idea. And that is how she had decided to become engaged. The engagement was announced in all the newspapers of the capital. Yet he did not come. Even though she received no more letters from him, Teresa felt sure he had heard the news. But the time which had been set for her engagement was running out, and still he had not come. And so the day of her wedding arrived, and still he wasn't there. Actually, however, and up to the last minute, desperately, stupidly, against all the laws of reason, she had expected him to come. Even in church, when the priest was saying the words, however useless, "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined together," she had foolishly hoped to see him suddenly appear before the altar and say, "Yes, I know one reason. This woman loves me, and I love her." Oh, what madness! What madness it was! He never loved me, Elga, never, Teresa lamented. Yes, what madness was hers! She had wanted to play with life, and life, to punish her, was now playing with her. And I had to go away with a man who is nothing to me, and yet is my husband, while, crushed, terrified, annihilated, I was listening to the outrageous confession of this young girl who, in her folly, had not hesitated to sacrifice the life and the heart of the man I adored. While I still love David desperately, desperately. I got up at last, and, leaning over the bed, I placed a firm hand on my cousin's shoulder. "Daniel must never know, Teresa, never," I said to her with all the strength I could muster, and those were the last words I spoke to her in my life, for Aunt Mercedes was already knocking at the door. I shall never forget the look Teresa gave me then, and how, with her eyes, she kept following me from that moment on. "He will never know. Nobody will ever know, Elga, I promise you," she said in a low voice as she kissed me just before she left. And many a time afterwards I asked myself if my heart's outcry had not made her become aware at that moment of my love for Daniel. 9. Indeed, my intuition had been right. Teresa had known I was in love with Daniel, yet, not having been able to fulfill more than a part of the promise she had made me, she had confided in the 3 young girls who had just told everything to Daniel. And so Daniel knew now that I had always loved him, and that, even though I knew Teresa's secret, I had kept silent. And a great pity came over him, which filled his entire being. Looking back now, he could see me as a pathetic little girl, ill-treated and despised, building up a dream world of her own as a shelter into which she had generously invited him to enter. He recalled how, as a big boy, rough and spoiled, he had taken advantage of my affection and abused it, how he had forced me to cut Teresa's braids, and how, even then, I had been able to keep this secret for his protection. He saw me later working silently on the embroidery for Teresa's trousseau while he was kissing her close by in the shadow of the drawing-room. And again, more vividly, he remembered our wedding night and the long winter of our marriage, in which I had once more, as always, kept silent while he was treating me cruelly and hurting me, covering me with ridicule and destroying my dreams. Whereas, with one word, I might have broken up his own dream forever. And he felt pain. He had to put his hand to his heart because he felt physical pain when he thought of all the harm he had done to me whose only crime had been to be the woman who loved him. And thus an irresistible desire came over him to run to me, to throw himself at my feet, to beg my pardon, to take me in his arms, and to tell me that he loved me, yes, that he loved me. For the miracle had happened, and suddenly he saw clearly within himself, and with amazement realized that, without knowing it, he had been in love with me for a long time. Free at last from the grief of Teresa's tragic death, no longer able to think of her except as one whom he had never known, whose frivolous and dark soul filled him with repulsion and sadness, he could at last understand why I was the one he loved. Yes, he was in love with me, and as he walked toward the lagoon looking for me, he was forced to admit to himself that the desperation with which he fought me and tried to humiliate me ever since the night of the ball had actually been caused by spite, by anguish, and by jealousy. Spite, because he felt that I had changed and had become indifferent to him. Anguish, because he could no longer feel burning at his side that silent, faithful love to which I had made him accustomed. And jealousy of all those men who might have come near me that evening, for since the moment he had seen me so beautiful in my ball dress, he had desired me intensely. And all this he at last understood, as he reached the edge of the lagoon and saw me out there in the act of... He then uttered a great cry and threw himself in the water, and as he was struggling to save me, he knew that I had become the most precious thing in all the world to him, and that life without me would no longer have any meaning for him. However, as I recovered consciousness, I did not realize immediately that it was in the arms of the most loving husband that I had come back to life. "Why did you save me?" I said softly, reproachfully. "And you, why did you stay silent so long about Teresa and the man she loved?" "Because I did not want to hurt you as you have hurt me. Because I did not want to kill in you all desire to live." "Do you really love me as much as that?" "Yes, I loved you as much as that before I ever knew the meaning of the word love." And marveling, I realized that in making that acknowledgment of my love, I had spoken the words he had so desperately longed to hear since the night of that ball. "Elga, Elga, you're so good, so frail, so lovely. When I think I have neglected you so long for someone who was never true to me, you who have always loved me, who have never understood what it means to be untrue, except in your dreams," he exclaimed, covering me with kisses. Thus, what I had thought to be the greatest misfortune in my life had, in fact, become the cause of the great happiness which had finally come to me. For it was only because my adventure had not been anything more than a dream, that I had not known or loved any man but my husband, that I had at last found Daniel's love. 10. Spring had now arrived, and with it all that remained of the mist disappeared. On the lagoon, no longer haunted by Teresa, the frogs could be heard in the evening spreading out their crystal chant. In the woods, the fountains also were singing, and likewise the blades of the big saws at work in the mills. And yet Daniel and I, in all the long walks we took through the woods, happy, in love, hand in hand, never did we find the tree that could sing, the tree of happiness. and because of that, in spite of myself, a lingering fear came quite often to interrupt my laughter and darken my thoughts.